Island, the world's greatest fun frolic, with its beach miles long, all peppered with people. The place where merriment is king.
Hurry, step this way, the strangest sights on the island. Freaks from the four corners of the world. For 2 nickels, 1 dime, a 10th part of $1, we've got the show if you've got the dime. It's just starting, so hurry, look 'em over, the lady without a head. There are thin ones, there are fat ones, they're all inside.
Martin Levy, the world's lightest heavyweight. He looks big, but it's all air. He's matching his skill against Fitzpatrick Cohen, and Fitz isn't feeling too good. And this is the end, and nothing will convince Cohen that the roof hasn't fallen in. Net.
Long before the giant wrestlers of television fame captured the world's imagination, there was Martin the Blimp Levy, a man whose size alone could stop a crowd in its tracks. Born into a world that marveled at extremes, he first drew crowds as a sideshow attraction, a carnival fat man whose presence was part curiosity, part entertainment. But Levy's journey from Coney Island to the wrestling ring was more than a story of brute strength. It was a transformation of wrestling itself. He helped shift the sport from a contest of skill to a stage for spectacle, proving that personality, theatrics, and a freak show could captivate audiences in ways few pure athletes ever could. In the story of Martin Levy, we see the birth of wrestling as entertainment, where the ring became a theater and the wrestlers became performers, rather than pure athletes. Victory mattered less than presentation, and realism gave way to awe. Levy's body itself was the attraction, a spectacle that challenged the boundaries between sport and showmanship. Long before wrestling openly embraced excess, pageantry, and myth-making, Martin the Blimp Levy stood at the center of the ring, proving that the extraordinary, not technique, not championships, was what truly made a star. Martin Levy was born on April 30th, 1905, in Boston, Massachusetts, into a Jewish family. Even as a child, his size set him apart. By the time he reached his bar mitzvah, he reportedly weighed around 200 pounds, and by high school, he had grown into a young man of extraordinary bulk, already hinting at the physical presence that would later define his career. His size was both a gift and a challenge. While it drew attention and admiration, it also set him apart from peers, making everyday activities and social integration difficult. Levy briefly explored athletics, playing football in his youth, but his sheer mass often made him more of a hazard on the field than an asset. Stories from this period suggest he accidentally injured teammates and other players by landing on them, and his coaches quickly realized that traditional sports might not be the best outlet for his unique physique. Instead, Levy found a place where his size could be celebrated rather than restrained: the Carnival. In the early 1930s, he began performing as a sideshow attraction at venues like Coney Island, billed as a fat man or a human spectacle. Crowds flocked to see him, fascinated by a man who seemed to defy normal human proportions. At the time Levy began performing, Coney Island was a center of American popular entertainment. Located in Brooklyn, it was a sprawling landscape of amusement parks, sideshows, freak exhibits, and novelty acts that drew millions of visitors each year. Performers were not valued for normalcy or restraint, but for their ability to astonish and hold attention. It was in this environment, where curiosity often blurred into exploitation, that Martin Levy learned how to command a crowd long before he ever stepped into a wrestling ring. Here, Levy honed the performance instincts that would later make him a star in wrestling. Every step, gesture, and appearance had to captivate the audience, and he quickly learned how to command attention simply by existing in a space far larger than anyone around him. These early carnival days not only introduced him to the world of entertainment, but also shaped his understanding of performance, a skill that would prove just as important as strength in his wrestling career. Levy's introduction to wrestling came through Jack Pfefer, one of the most notorious and influential promoters of the era. Pfefer discovered Levy in the 1930s while he was working in the Coney Island sideshow. At least, that was the version of the story Pfefer preferred to tell. Whether myth or marketing, the tale fit perfectly with Pfeffer's philosophy. Wrestling was not about realism or refinement, but about attraction. Pfefer was famous for populating his cards with what he openly called freaks, performers whose appearances alone could sell tickets before they ever locked up in the ring. He once explained his approach bluntly to a reporter. "You can't get $1 with a normal-looking guy no matter how good he can wrestle. Those birds with shaved egg-shaped heads, handlebar mustaches, tattooed bodies, big stomachs, they're for me." In Martin Levy, Pfefer saw not just a wrestler, but a man whose body told a story before the bell ever rang. Under Pfeffer's guidance, Levy was rechristened the Blimp, a nickname that emphasized scale, immovability, and awe. Pfefer promoted him throughout the 1930s and 1940s, often billing him at fantastical weights and positioning him in high-profile matches designed to maximize shock and curiosity, rather than competitive realism. A typical card might feature Levy in a semifinal bout, framed not as a test of skill, but as an event, a moment where audiences could witness what happened when an ordinary wrestler was forced to confront something extraordinary. What Pfefer understood, and what Levy embodied, was that wrestling was becoming a form of live theater. The Blimp did not need to wrestle like a champion. He needed to exist as a spectacle. His size, his movement, and even the way opponents reacted to him were part of the performance. In Pfeffer's hands, Martin Levy became a bridge between the carnival and the ring, carrying the logic of the sideshow directly into professional wrestling and helping redefine what it meant to be a star. Levy's early matches followed a predictable but effective formula. He won quickly, often toppling his opponents with minimal effort, using simple movements rather than learned technique. To audiences, this only reinforced the illusion that his sheer mass rendered traditional wrestling knowledge irrelevant. The message was clear: size alone could conquer skill. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, Levy wrestled across the United States territories, defeating recognizable names such as Nature Boy Buddy Rogers and Gorgeous George. These victories were less about competitive credibility than presentation. Under Jack Pfefer's guidance, Levy was positioned as an attraction first and a wrestler second, a living spectacle whose presence justified the price of admission regardless of match quality. Pfefer was so confident in Levy's drawing power that he pitched him internationally. In 1948, he urged Australian promoters to book the Blimp not as a serious competitor, but as an exhibition, promising that, quote, "All that you have to do is use him as an extra few minutes exhibition, and I am more than sure that the Blimp will sell out every arena." Critics, however, were far less charitable. One newspaper summed up his abilities with brutal simplicity. "As a wrestler, he is very fat." By 1949, Levy was effectively useless in the ring, relying entirely on his weight rather than any form of athleticism. A program for a March 8, 1949 Sportatorium card openly acknowledged his limitations, noting that Levy could no more place a dropkick than he can train down to 200 pounds and win the junior heavyweight title. Even wrestling, an industry built on illusion, could no longer disguise the reality of his physical decline. By the mid-1940s, the physical toll of being wrestling's spectacle had become impossible to ignore. Levy's health was rapidly deteriorating, and in a rare moment where reality intruded on promotion, the Connecticut State Athletic Commission revoked his professional wrestling license on the recommendation of physicians who examined him. In the aftermath of this decision, Levy briefly performed abroad, touring Malaysia and Singapore, where he wrestled Dara Singh and other prominent South Asian wrestlers. These appearances were less a revival than a final echo, an attempt to extend a career that had already been overtaken by physical decline, The spectacle still existed, but the performer behind it was fading. By 1951, Levy's in-ring career had effectively ended, though he continued to make promotional appearances, returning to the role that had first made him famous. He was once again billed not as a wrestler, but as a curiosity. In September 1961, advertised as the 944-pound fat man, Levy was scheduled to appear at the 54th Annual Tennessee State Fair. Before the engagement even began, he suffered a mild heart attack in his trailer. Yet, in a grim testament to the demands of spectacle, Levy returned to the stage before the fair's run had ended. Less than 2 months later, on November 8, 1961, Martin "the Blimp" Levy died in his home in Alabama at the age of 58. He reportedly weighed nearly 900 pounds. His death marked not just the end of a career, but the closing chapter of an era when wrestling, and American entertainment more broadly, built stars by turning human excess into public attraction. As one of the earliest Jewish figures in professional wrestling, Levy occupies an important cultural space. His career was later recognized by the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research in Manhattan, where he was honored as part of the Yiddish Fight Club exhibit, preserving his place in the history of Jewish participation in early combat sports and entertainment. In an era when outsiders were frequently defined by their difference, Levy's visibility, however complicated, ensured that he could not be ignored. Perhaps most enduring is Levy's influence on what wrestling would become. He is widely regarded as one of the first true giants of professional wrestling, paving the way for later attractions such as Giant Haystacks and Man Mountain Mike, and ultimately for the lineage of super heavyweights that would define wrestling's visual language. These performers followed a path Levy helped carve, where size alone could command awe, fear, and fascination. Yet Levy's story also serves as a cautionary tale. His body brought him fame, but it also consumed him, leaving behind a legacy inseparable from the physical cost of being a living spectacle. In the end, Martin "the Blimp" Levy stands as both pioneer and warning, a man who helped turn wrestling into theater, and whose life reveals the price paid when entertainment demands that the extraordinary never stop performing.